Good day to you. Today again we are looking at what I'm calling a series of Bible 101, where we are going to basically survey the Bible, not an in-depth study, but something I hope that will spike your interest for studying God's Word a little deeper. As we went through and looked at Genesis and looked at basically the rest of the, we looked at, what was it last week, Joshua. Now we are looking at the end of Joshua's life, basically in the book of Judges. We have the transition where they are going from great leaders. Matter of fact, we have basically two generations overlapping that has never been without a great leader. They had never been on their own, especially those that was there with Joshua. Those that was there with Joshua, they basically have none in their adult, and even some of them in their childhood memory. They had never been without a strong leadership. They had, of course, Moses. They had Moses, and Moses talked to them. Moses preached to them. Matter of fact, I'd like for us to look just a little while or a little bit at something that he said to them that I believe is an important part that we need to see and talk about. And we need to go to Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, there in verse 9, where God spoke to them, it says here in Deuteronomy 4:9, we find these words. It says, "Only take heed to yourself and diligently keep yourself, lest you forget the things your eyes have seen, and lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life, and teach them to your children and your grandchildren." Here God told them through Moses that they was to remember, keep the law that was given to them, to keep it in their hearts and to teach it to their children and their grandchildren. It's pretty plain here. If it's not plain enough, I would like for you to go over to chapter 6, there in verse 6 and 7. There in Deuteronomy 6 and 7. It says, "And these words which I commanded you today shall be in your heart." That means keep them. We say what I interpret this in everyday speech today is don't forget them. That's what he's saying. Don't forget them. Keep them deep in your heart, in your memory, in your mind. It says, "You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you are set in your home, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up." Here it told them, you shall talk to your children, then you shall talk about them. It's not just during a 1 hour on Sunday or the Lord's Day or a Wednesday, but when you get up, when you sit down, you are to remember and teach your children these things. I say this because I believe when we are looking at the book, when we look at the book of Judges, we are seeing the shortcoming of God's people. The shortcoming of God's people in the book of Judges is the same thing that may be the shortcoming of God's people today, and was the shortcoming of the decline of the people of Israel in the day of the Judges. I'm going to say this because we look in the Judges when they came in chapter 1 of the book of Judges. They came in, they was led by Joshua, they came in to the land. But when they went into the land, all of a sudden they stopped doing what God told them to do. They started making covenants and not destroying and making treaties. Instead of driving people out or killing them, they said, "Oh, we keep them," and they basically had them work for them. Oh, good to have servants. And they let them have their servants. But not only that, we can see in the first chapter and then on They even, instead of driving them out, they let them into their life. They let the culture of the pagans into their lives. But that wasn't the worst sin. They let that in. But then in chapter 2, before Joshua died, he was talking to a generation that knew Moses. A generation that had saw some of them crossing of the Red Sea. All of the adults had crossed the Jordan River. All of them had saw the wall of Jericho fall. They had seen the power of God. And in chapter 2, after they had made the pacts and they had not driven out, they had not trusted in God, in chapter 2 it says, and the angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal and said, I made you to go up out of Egypt, and have brought you into the land which I swore unto your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. God was reminding them, I did this, and I said I would not break my covenant with you. And you shall, but he says, and this, the rest of it, and ye shall make no league with the inhabitants of the land. You shall throw down their altars, but you have not obeyed my voice. Why have you done this? They had made leagues, the agreement, peace treaties. Well, they did it for a reason. Hey, I just have somebody else do my work instead of me. And then they had said, well, let them have their worship and we have ours. God did not intend for that, because pollution caused corruption. And he knew that. Verse 3 says, therefore I also said, I would not drive them out from before you, but they shall be a thorn in your side, and their gods will be a snare unto you. He said, since you're not going to do it, I'm just going to make you, they're going to be there. They're going to be a thorn. As a matter of fact, we see what happened in the rest of the book and all through the Old Testament, almost to the time of the kings and to the time of David and Solomon. Those people that they left ended up being their enemies, and many times controlled and had them working for them. Why? Because of what they had done. In verse 4 it says, and it came to pass, when the angel of the Lord spoke these words unto all the children of Israel, that the people lifted up their voices and wept. That's the greatest statement I see in this book right here, right now. These people that had knew and that obeyed and saw the power of God, had been washed and baptized in the sea and the cloud, they wept. I think that's a way of saying they repented. They saw the error of their ways, but they was already going to have to suffer the consequence of their ways. Already going to have. You know, I have baptized many people after they was in their 30s, 40s, or even 50s, and they have almost wept because they had to live with the consequence of their life before then. Their children, their grandchildren did not have a life dedicated to God from it. Why? Well, because of the same thing that had happened to this generation. And notice, it says in verse 6, and when Joshua had let the people go, the children of Israel went every man into his inheritance to possess the land. They left. And I like 7. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders that outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great works of the Lord that he had done for Israel. Those that had seen it, I think in America, give you a little bit of example, I think in America, we have a generation now that has, when I was growing up, when many of you was growing up, you had a generation, and some of you even saw the Second World War and the struggles and everything, and what this country went through and how they came together. And you kept that spirit. Now we have a country that people don't realize that. They don't even know, many people just younger than I am, some almost my age, don't even know what the Second World War was about or who we fought. Why? Because they have lost touch. Yes, in the Second World War, people called on God because we needed God. We thought we was going to lose that war. It looked like we was going to overcome. And we became a praying nation. People turning to God. Now we have got away from God. These people, they did this. And it says, this happened. And why did this happen? It happened because they knew. But I'm going to tell you one thing that happened to this generation. And the rest of the book of Judges is all about what happened. They did not keep what was told to them to do in Deuteronomy 6 and 7 and 4 and 9. They did not do that. They didn't do that at all. It says in verse 10 of Judges chapter 2 verse 10, it says, and also all the generation was gathered unto their fathers, and there arose another generation after them, which knew not the Lord, nor yet the works which he had done for Israel. What did they not do? What caused Israel to be taken over once, taken over again? Now, God didn't let them be destroyed. He raised the judges. The judges basically kept them from being totally covered up. It kept them alive just enough because they would part of the, and the judges, most of them didn't rule but one or two parts of the country, but there was a religious, there was a righteous revival in one part of the country, then another part of the country. So Jehovah's truth never did become overwhelmed. It almost did many times. It almost did. Why? Because people stopped teaching their children. I've talked to people about that. That's something that hurts me. People think ball games, studying, oh, they can't come on Wednesday night, they got too much homework. Well, why don't they study on Tuesday night where they got ball practice? That don't make sense. When things become more important, that's what happened to them. They neglected to teach their children. It says, it remained faithful all that generation and that generation after that. But that next generation, what happened? Read the book of Judges and you see what happened. I'm not going to go through all of it. It's probably one of the saddest books I know of. It because people sinned. Even the judges, some of them were so sinned they made the oath. They treated God like they're a pagan God. The one man said, well, God, if I defeat them, I'm going to give you my daughter. I'm going to a human sacrifice. In the name of religion, in the name of Jehovah. We have people today that's so confused in religion. Why? They have gotten away from God's word. Friends, let us not become a generation. And I'm thinking we are already that way somewhat. Let us go back to the day of Joshua and be those people that can say, God, we are going to come back. And let us come all the way back. Not just doing what we know to do, but doing what God told them to do there in 6 and 4. When he told them, he says, teach your what? Your children. If we don't do that, I started to say we are in trouble. No, we are creating trouble for our children and our grandchildren. Pray. Pray for your children. Pray for your grandchildren. Pray for mine. But let us also instruct them in God's Word, because prayers without action, they cannot hear. God be with you till we meet again.